Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. They'll stand out there till lunchtime if you let them.
Yeah.
Come on in and sit down, please. All of us have heard or seen the lead times for engines out of Lycoming, 16 weeks, 20 weeks, things of this nature. And I have a individual to introduce you to, Bill Wagner. He is my go-to engine builder, and he builds Lycoming engines, been doing it for a number of years, and he's recently, in fact, you'll see a couple of his engines sitting out on engine at lunch today. And with that said, Bill.
Good morning. My name's Bill Wagner, like Ken said. My business is Skyboss Aviation here in Tulsa. I'm pretty fortunate to have my business right here in Tulsa. We kind of call it the Mecca of general aviation. We've got a lot of service shops that do case work, crankshaft work, machine work, all the things that go into putting an engine together besides just the actual assembly of the engine. We use aircraft specialties, Divco, Crankcase Services, Rick Roman's machine shop here in Tulsa. One of the things that I do tell most of my customers is, if you bring your engine to me, I'm not going to disassemble it and then let UPS play with it, sending the parts all over the country to get them fixed. I hand carry the parts to the service shops, and then I go pick them up from the service shops. So there's no shipping damage and problems with tearing up a crankshaft or a case or any of the larger components of the engines. I've been doing this since 1987. I went to Spartan School of Aeronautics here in Tulsa. I went to work for Mid-States Aircraft Engines back then for Mike Miller. Went to work at American Airlines for 13 years, worked in the turbine shop, building Pratt & Whitney 217 engines for the MD-80s. Then I decided to be a golf pro, and I did that for 11 years. and then decided I'd get my toolbox back out and went to work at Barrett Precision Engines here in Tulsa. Worked for them for about 4 years and decided, I think I can do this. And so I opened my own shop 2014. Been going ever since. I was at the Pogue Airport in Sand Springs for a while and recently moved over here in West Tulsa. I'm about three and a half miles northwest of this airport, or Jones Airport. That being said, I do magnetos. We do complete engine assemblies. Continental and Lycoming. I know you guys are mainly interested in the Lycoming engines, the S1A5s, the K1F5s, and the U2As. Those engines are all real similar. The internal workings of the engines, the external components and that sort of thing is what sets them apart. But the basic engine is similar. They're not exactly the same, but they're very similar inside. With that being said, I'll take any questions you all have about any part of the engine or the workings of it.
When the airplane sits for a while, we've been told that the can has the opportunity to rust and cause problems. Is there any way I can get a borescope easily in there and see what's going on, just to provide a level of comfort? My airplane had to sit for a year, so I was just concerned about what was going on in there.
Typically, no. I mean, it's pretty hard to see the camshaft or the face of the lifter. Yeah, pulling the cylinder is basically the only way to really view. The camshaft sometimes will not show any wear. It's the lifter face you'll be able to physically see some wear or pitting, and that's what starts the process, contaminating the oil, sending those particles throughout the engine, and the crankshaft problem, the camshaft goes. But as far as just looking at it with a borescope, no, it's hard to see.
Where would I see that problem initially? In my oil analysis or in the filter?
The filter.
Right.
Oil analysis is great if you start out from scratch and you did oil analysis exactly the same way every time. You started the engine, you let it warm up, you let the oil drain, then or however you want to do it, whatever process you want to use, but do it exactly the same way every time. If you take the last bit of oil that comes out of the engine or the first bit, it's going to be different as far as the spectral analysis goes. The best thing to do is open the filter, cut it open, lay it out, rinse it into a clean pan, and then look for material. You can use a magnet at that point and find out if you got ferrite or what's happening.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
When you take an engine apart for overhaul, what do you traditionally what traditionally do you find problems with? There we go. When you take an engine apart for overhaul, let's say it's a first run engine. There's been no prop strikes or any history like that. When you look at the crankshaft, what areas are you looking at, and what kind of service life can you generally get out of a first run engine crankshaft? Can you go 2 overhauls with them, depending everything is correct? And also the camshaft, do you recommend replacing camshafts or just doing an overhaul on the camshaft and putting it back in?
Yeah, when we disassemble a first run engine, the crankshaft was standard, brand new camshaft. First thing I'm going to do is visually look at it, put it on V stands and check the run out, that sort of stuff, just to check it. That crankshaft does flex in the engine all the time, whether you had a prop strike or not. It's the nature of it. But most of the time, if you've changed your oil regularly, you've done maintenance as correctly as possible. I've torn engines apart that the guy went 3,800 hours and he didn't have to have a crankshaft ground. It stayed standard. But I've had others that have had 1,000 hours and they tear it apart and the oil is black as coal, and they have to go -10 on it. Now, the good thing about a Lycoming crankshaft, Lycoming allows you to take a standard crankshaft and grind it to -3 the first time. The second time you can go to -6, and the third time to -10. So that crankshaft has a lot more life than, say, a Continental engine who is either standard or -10. They go straight to 10. The two shops that I use for crankshaft work, after I look it over and I don't see anything just glaringly bad, it goes to the Aircraft Specialties or Rick Romans, and they do a mag particle inspection, ultrasonic inspection, dimension inspection, and looking for flaws, and then they'll grind the crankshaft if needed or polish the journals, whichever is needed. I take it to those guys because they don't just automatically throw it up there and start grinding on it. You know, they try to save these crankshafts because a lot of times you can't get a crankshaft. I mean, Lycoming right now is having a part shortage, and it's tough to get parts. Just like Ken said, 16 weeks to get an engine, where I'm at 12 to 14 weeks total. And that's just because my service shops are so backed up. For whatever reason, General Aviation has had a huge amount of business lately. I've seen it, all the service shops. There's just a lot of work out there. And so they're behind. But if you can save a crankshaft, that's the way to go. And Lycoming, like I said, they give you 3 opportunities to save that crank.
One other question. You said, of course, the crankshaft is flexing while it's normal operation. Do you see much in the flange? Do you see much changes in the flange on the front of the crankshaft when you do it? In other words, is there something you have to do to go in and fix the flange, or see any bending over a normal life of a crankshaft?
Well, you have, I think it's a 0 to 0.003 tolerance on the deflection in the flange. And no, we don't. We don't see a lot of that. Mainly what causes the problem is improper torque on the cylinders and the through bolts. And so that torquing or that flexing of the crankshaft starts causing a fretting problem between the case halves. When that happens, the case shop, when they get the cases, they look for fretting, and they measure a distance between the parting surface and the cylinder base. And that has to maintain a specific dimension, otherwise the case is reject. So the less amount of material they've got to remove for fretting, the better. That goes back to another issue with pulling a cylinder to check for corrosion. When you pull a cylinder on a Lycoming engine, you've taken the torque off of that side or that cylinder, but the cylinder across from it, those 2 through bolts, you've also taken the torque off of those. So a lot of guys will put the cylinder back on, torque it up, and take off. Well, you've got to go around the other side and torque that other side back too. That's what sets up that fretting problem. And then, of course, you don't want to lose a case just because you didn't torque your cylinders back correctly.
They'll talk about the standard conventional cam bobber system versus the roller cam.
Yeah, the Lycoming engines, they have the roller cams,
Some engines, not all.
well, they offer it in some engines, yeah. It has helped a little bit with the tappet wear, but the biggest thing they've done recently is with their lifter faces, they put a diamond coating on them that I've pulled engines apart now that have had 2,000 hours on them, and those lifter faces look like brand new. It's a very, very hard coating. In fact, the machine shops can't even grind them and recondition them. They haven't found anything that'll cut that stuff. So you may lose a camshaft, but you're not going to lose it to fretting with the lifter faces. The roller cam, right. Well, you see the corrosion, but it doesn't affect the lifter face because it's so hard. There's always going to be corrosion if you let an engine sit for a length of time. There's moisture in the oil. There's moisture in the case itself. Just the cooling and heating of your hanger is going to set up a greenhouse effect inside that engine. And that little bit of moisture is going to be absorbed by the oil. Well, unless you get that oil good and hot and cook all that out, those acids and all the things the oil not only lubricates the engine, but it cleans the engine. And so all that acid that's in the oil is going to just sit there and ferment on your engine parts. So it's a good idea not just to get your engine out or your airplane out and start it up and get it hot and then put it back in the hangar. That's probably the worst thing you can do because you've just created some heat. Now you're going to cool it back off and there comes the moisture. So the roller lifters, though, just create less friction. There's a lot less friction between the camshaft and the cam follower and the valve train. So that being said, you don't see the wear on a roller cam like you would on a flat tappet camshaft and lifter. But that diamond coating on the Lycoming lift cam like you would on a flat tappet camshaft and lifter. But that diamond coating on the Lycoming lifter faces it's a game changer as far as lifter wear and cam wear. Yeah.
You guys can request a brand new.
How about like your shelf, you get yourself, and then I guess well, the way I would look at it is, all right, so what does it cost for a Lycoming factory reman, and what's the probability of it getting to TBO? And then what does it cost if it's built by a shop, and what's the probability of it getting to TBO under the same or similar circumstances? So I guess I would be really curious to hear your opinion as to how you would compare yourself to Lycoming factory reman, both in terms of cost under normal circumstances, just on a percentage level is fine, and chance of getting to a TBO.
Yeah, good question then. And
Bill's, let's clarify something. You're talking about a zero-time engine in a rebuild, or a remanufactured engine, or an overhaul. Bill can only overhaul an engine and reestablish a TBO. So you can't compare a rebuilt engine with an overhauled engine, because Lycoming is the only one to get a rebuilt zero-time engine.
And the reason that is because Lycoming is going to use all Lycoming parts, OEM parts. When you send it to me, I'm going to use superior parts where I can because of the cost. The cost of a reman engine from Lycoming compared to mine is probably $15,000 to $20,000 difference. And a lot of that is the parts, the superior air parts that I would use are PMA approved. They're exactly the same. They're probably made in the same place as the OEM parts, but the superior parts are less expensive. Now, that being said, Superior doesn't make all the parts. So there are a lot of parts that are Lycoming only, OEM parts, just like those lifter faces. I would use those in lieu of a Superior tappet body just because they're superior product. It's a better product. Yeah, but I pick and choose what I want to use. A lot of times there is no choice, and you have to use Lycoming parts. But that being said, we save you all money by using the superior parts. And as far as going to TBO, there is no difference. I mean, you can only put that engine together one way. And if you put it together wrong, it's going to fail. But if apples to apples, if you're putting an engine together, a guy at Lycoming and a guy at a shop, and they're doing it exactly the same way, using the same processes to assemble the engine, it's going to go the same amount of time. The one thing I do offer that I don't know that Lycoming does is I dynamically balance the crankshafts. At Aircraft Specialties, they have a balance machine for the crankshafts. They dynamically balance that crank. I balance the connecting rods to 0 grams on the heel and the toe, or the big end and the little end. I measure and weigh each rod, and we pick and choose rods until we get them perfectly matched. So the balance in the engine is what I believe causes longevity. If you've got an engine that has a vibration to it, no matter how small, that vibration is going to fatigue parts. And the less vibration you can get in an engine, the more balanced you can get that engine, the less vibration. And that's how I was taught to build engines, and it seems to work.
Bill Williams?
Morning, Bill. I have one of Mr. Wagner's engines in my Eurostar. I love it. It's great. Thank you for your good work. I said I have one of Mr. Wagner's engines in my Eurostar. I love it. It works terrific. Thank you for your good work. I wanted to clarify that question a little bit. There are 3 different permutations of engine replacement. There's brand new, which is exactly what it sounds like. There's the factory remanufactured, which is the word that you use. And there's the factory overhaul. And correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, but I think what he was comparing a factory overhaul with a field overhaul, which is what you would be furnishing. The difference between the factory remanufactured and the factory overhaul is the parts that get used. When you set your engine in and do a factory overhaul, they keep all of your engine parts, but they replace all of the ones that are required to be replaced by the overhaul with parts. When you get a factory remanufactured, that is not. They get broken down, all their component parts, and placed in the diesel parts. Later on, they decide to build an engine, factory remanufactured engine. They go back through and they take out whatever parts they need. So the factory remanufactured engine is actually a compilation of many other prior engines. It's not, when you read the description of how they actually do it, it's not as impressive as the labeling seems to imply. Personally, for me, I'd rather have an overhaul or brand new, but not factory manufactured, because those parts come from the overhaul formed by him and the factory overhaul versus the factory manufactured. Did I speak correctly?
Yes. Well, like he mentioned, the parts that are mandatory to be replaced at overhaul, we do that, and then some. We don't try to reuse this or try to reuse that. If they say you have this, you have to replace that, that is what we do. We do it by the book, by the overhaul manual, overhaul manual. We don't use 10 times, let's try it again. We replace everything that mandatorily needs to be replaced, and that gives us the opportunity to say that we're going to reset your T to 0, and you can buy this engine for 2,000 hours before you have to disassemble it again, or whatever your TBO is. Lycoming. If you specify to me that you want all Lycoming parts in your engine, then it's going to be a Lycoming overhaul. I'm going to balance the crankshaft. I'm going to balance all the pistons. I'm going to balance all the rods. And I'm going to try to make it as smooth running an engine as possible. And I think that increases horsepower. It increases longevity. I don't know. Now, I have got a specification of what they do, but it's not.
J2As and Super 2s. If you buy a factory remit J2BD, all the Lycoming parts that come on that engine, you cannot use. Because they did all their stuff, they did all the modifications, and you send these brand new parts back to Lycoming, absolutely no credit for them whatsoever. So on that engine, it's better to have a field overhaul done on the Super J.
That's good to know. Thank you, Bill.
The other thing, I'd just like to correct, it's, they don't call it.
Rebuild. It's a single time engine.
One difference is that, all the parts are to new specifications.
Yeah.
So, that there is a little bit of a difference in an overall one. But, so all the parts are to new tolerances.
Yeah,
They're not, they might be new, but they're not necessarily.
they're at least standard.
Yeah, and that's the case with a crankcase. Say a crankcase, you take it to Crankcase Services or Divco. They're going to bring it back to new part specifications. They're going to cut the parting surfaces, but then put them together, torque them up, and line hone it back to zero. So, and or factory rebuilt or factory overhaul.
Gary, would you get the mic from Bill?
The definition of overhaul has been, it changes with a lot of shops. Let me say that. There's a lot of difference in processes of different shops. What we try to do is as close to the factory as we possibly can by repairing and replacing parts that mandatorily need to be replaced. Yes.
There are a lot of experiences and opinions about lubrication, oils and additives. Can you speak to the best practices that you've experienced and we've seen in the parts that you have coming into your shop?
Yeah, I've always been an Aeroshell guy. Break your engine in with Aeroshell 100, straight mineral oil, old school.
Not turbocharged engines.
Well, not turbocharged. Yeah,
What do you use for turbocharger?
just the regular ashless dispersant oil.
100W.
Yeah, the Aeroshell 100W.
W indicates it's ashless disbursement.
Although there is a lot of shops now, and I try to learn every day. I don't just say this is the way it is and that's it. A lot of shops are using the Phillips 2050 straight mineral oil for break-in and having really good success with that. So I believe all the oils nowadays are pretty good oil. The additives after break-in, the cam guard, I don't know what other kind of additives you would be. Yeah, I don't know enough about it, the ab blend. I do know the cam guard. I've been lucky to be tutored by two really, really good engine builders in my career, and both of them like the cam guard. So that being said, it must be something to it. But after break-in, we got to get those cylinders happy. They've got to be broke in good. Your oil consumption's got to be stabilized before you start putting any kind of additives in. But the main thing to do is just change the oil regularly. Don't don't put it off. Don't just change the filter. I see all kinds of things, and it just doesn't work. If you take the oil out of the engine, you're taking all of the carbon deposits, all of the sludge, all the dirt, all the stuff that the oil captures, and you're getting it out of your engine, and you're putting fresh oil in there. It's just like taking a shower. You know, if you don't take a shower, guess what? You know. So,
Where's the microphone? You have a question?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Bill, from a logistics standpoint, let's say I'm like, okay, I want to get my engines overhauled. So is it that my mechanic has to remove them, we ship them to you, or do I fly an airplane to you, or how does the logistics work? Approximate turnaround time and approximate cost?
These are S-185.
Okay.
The 601B, S1.
Well, two ways you can do it. Wherever you're located, your mechanic can remove the engines and ship to me. I've got a really good freight broker. That's what he does. He does it for a lot of engine shops in the country and gets a really good price. We'd like to have them in a crate, but it's not necessary. But to ship them back to you, it's going to be in a crate, you know, ready to go. Or you can fly your airplane to Jones Airport, and we have a couple of different shops. Tulsa Airworks can remove the engines, bring them to my shop. I overhaul them, take them back to Tulsa Airworks. They install the engines. At the same time, they can do an annual inspection if you need. There's also Air Electric here in Tulsa at Jones Airport. They can do any avionics upgrades, all that stuff can be done while the engine is being overhauled. So we do offer all that. It's on my website, skybossaviation.com, and it can kind of explain that. The turn time, like I say, right now is 12 to 14 weeks, and that's simply because the case shops and the machine shops are pretty backed up. One of the main machine shops here in Tulsa Aircraft Specialties, they have one of the only nitriding ovens I guess in this part of the country. And they were down for a couple of weeks with their nitriding oven doing some upgrades on it. So that really got everybody behind. And I asked the owner, I said, well, how many shops do you do nitriding for? And he said, about 3,000. So it was widespread, you know, what happened. But they're back up and running now. For an S1A5, complete overhaul, it's hard to say, but yeah, 32 to 36,000. It's all based on what they got to do to the crank. The case is pretty much the same. Every shaft and the machine work, and then what parts fall out, what parts are rejected, the camshaft. Yeah. The Iran? Yeah. Like Bill's engine, we didn't have to remove the connecting rods. We disassembled the engine. He was having to go to the crankshaft and rods intact and the counterweights. So right there, he saved on the machine work on the crank, the machine work on the connecting rods, counterweights, and just a bunch of parts that weren't used. Now, work way. If there had been a shaft, we would have had to disassemble it and send it to the shop. low time. That also, okay,
Bill, a little bit about oil and the different scenarios we operate airplanes in, drives a lot of what oil we choose. But I read something that I was curious about in one of the articles months ago. And it says if you start life on say viscosity, anything in your experience that gives credence to why that would be useful.
don't. Um, that the oil is there for lubrication, cleaning, and heat disbursement. So I don't think that it's going to make that much difference. I'd have to read the article.
That was my thought too. But,
Yeah.
it was just a strange thing. I had a guy who just had engine so small.
Speaking of a good article, there's a book that you had me buy that talk about that.
Well, and I'm trying to remember the guy's name. He owned Sky Ranch out in John Schwartz, and the reason parts fail. But it also has some very, very good information for pilots and the way you fly your airplane and the things to look for and the things to do. Changing the air filter on your aircraft is probably one of the best things you can do for your engine, because the sand, the silica, the dirt that gets in that engine, that's worse than the corrosion that might set up from not running your engine for.
What's the name of that book? Sorry.
It was.
Say it again. Sky Ranch Engineering. Yes, sir.
Yeah. And I think he's got 2 or 3 books out, but this one was on
Engines.
Engine failures and operation.
Very good book. A lot of good information. He talks about how they do that.
Yeah, actually Piper, all the aircraft manufacturers like to tout their numbers, how fast the airplane is, how climb rates and all that. And so they try to get as lean a mixture or a full rich mixture settings as possible, as lean as possible at full rich, so that they get the best performance out of the aircraft. And the Aerostar actually is about as lean as you can get at full rich.
Especially turbocharged.
Yeah.
Looks like Sky Ranch engine manual operation failure repair piston aircraft engine.
Yep.
And it was like copyright 1991 or something like that.
Mm-hmm. I think the guy's passed away now, but he's a. Yeah.
Second edition.
Yeah.
You can get up on that. Sky Ranch engine manual.
I bought it on Amazon as well.
Oh, yeah, then there's another.
Roger?
Yeah, I got a question on
You got it.
Got a question on the oil resetter engine, like homing factory remanufactured. And it was my understanding, as far as oil goes, we're not using breaking oil.
Strict. Oh, single viscosity oil.
Straight in for breaking.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
They also recommend ashless dispersion oil for turbocharged engines.
Yeah.
They also, one of the reasons
And you probably, they say 25 hours and they're just being safe.
So what happens if you use mineral oil in a turbocharged car?
Well, like you said, the coking, that oil doesn't, it contains all those particles. And when an engine is first started after overhaul, you're going to have a lot of material that's just the nature of it. And that straight mineral oil is going to carry those particles throughout the engine. Whereas the ashless dispersant is going to disperse the oil or the problem, the byproducts, and keep the engine clean.
So if it was done with mineral oil, what do? Just changes as soon as you
Well,
can?
Just change it.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
do you have to worry, how much do you have to worry after it's been done wrong?
no,
Not
I,
worry.
I don't think so.
Was a rebuilt turbocharged engine, do they run them on the stand without the turbocharger? And use mineral oil?
They can, yes. I don't run turbos on my engine stand. When I was at Barrett's, we did. We ran all the engines as they were, you know, configured. So
If they say, no, use mineral oil, why use mineral oil in any engine, then do they still break in? Does that make sense?
I think it's for the speed in which the break-in period happens.
That's right.
I think if you just didn't use mineral oil, you take a chance first on not having your ring seat, and second, it's just going to take a lot longer for them to seat. With the straight mineral oil, after 10 or 15 hours, I don't know, Bill, how long you didn't even run it, you just ran the straight oil, and you're fine.
Mineral oil is better for engine break-in, but the benefit of its faster accomplishment is overcome by the damage that it does to turbochargers. So the reason that we don't use it on turbocharged engines is not because it hurts the engine or helps the engine, but because it hurts the turbochargers.
Mm-hmm.
And non-turbocharged engines, we can take advantage of the faster rate of break-in associated with mineral oil. But in turbocharged engines, we run the risk of damaging the other components, and that's why we don't do it.
There's been success in breaking engines in without using mineral oil.
When you rebuild an engine, you run it on the stand, I presume?
Yes, yes,
So if you have a turbocharged engine, you run it without the turbo?
yes, yes, yes. Now we're only running the engine on the engine stand for about an hour, and it's mainly just to check to make sure that we don't have any leaks, that the engine makes power, and that all the components, the fuel system, is working properly. It's not a break-in period. That break-in period happens over the first 10 to 15 hours on the airplane.
One other thorny question, any opinions on lean peak?
I'm not a fan. Like I said, I was very fortunate to learn from a couple of really, really good engine builders, and neither one of them were a fan. You run a risk of a lot of problems: detonation, hot spots. If you can monitor your engine constantly, and you know where you're at lean a peak, where you actually know where peak is, then okay, do it. But I'm not a fan, because too many people, first of all, they don't know where peak is, so they're probably leaning way past it, or they're not getting there in the first place. And for the savings, for the actual fuel savings, I don't think it's worth it. Taking a chance on damaging an engine and causing you a lot more money than the amount of fuel you saved.
Bill, thank you. We gotta move on to
Okay.
insurance. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Bill will be out at Christensen Aviation where we're having lunch, and he's got a couple of engines for a 600 that we've been working on for some time out there with some innovative product on it. Lance, you ready? I'm sorry we've taken so much of your time, but we will. We'll just delay lunchtime.
Did you get a new computer? Welcome to the Oklahoma Fire Alarm Conference. Hope I'm in the right room.
If the fire alarm you are. Give us a demonstration, Jimmy.
Probably stop you from yawning during my presentation. Okay. All right, let's see here. Okay. All right, so, one of these days, whenever the market gets soft and everybody's premiums start going back down, we can actually start talking about more of the coverages and getting back to educating on that. But I know that, the market's still a hot topic right now, so that's kind of what we're going to go. So I've got have gathered several good data points over the past couple of years or so, and I think we all love data. So I think I'm trying to give more of a background of why things are going on and what's happening just in aviation in general, but also insurance. So these first couple of slides may not necessarily apply to you guys in particular, but I think that it's just good to show all around. So the first, what we have here is, in these first several slides, I got the data maybe about 6 months or so ago, so we didn't have any, but there's a couple more. Jets and props. The reason for showing this is because the insurance companies, these are the safest accounts to write. This is what they want to write. And you can see that